Night hangs over Cleveland like a low, waiting breath. Gas lamps hiss along muddy streets. Wagon wheels grind over frozen ruts. In a small, lamplit room above a modest storefront, a young clerk bends over a ledger. His fingers are ink-stained. His shoulders ache. Outside, the world is loud and uncertain. Banks fall. Fortunes vanish overnight. But in here, every number, every cent, lines up in perfect rows. The boy's name is John Davison Rockefeller. The window rattles with a wind that smells of coal smoke and lake water. Somewhere, a church bell tolls the hour. Rockefeller does not look up. He is counting. He is always counting. Cents into dollars, dollars into power, power into something only he seems to see. Behind him, his mother's voice lingers in memory. Save, John. Save, and someday money will work for you. Behind that, an absent father, part peddler, part ghost, teaching him in a different way. In this world, no one will protect you but yourself. He presses his thumb over a neat column of figures. These are not just payments and balances. These are stepping stones. In the hum of the lamps and the quiet scratch of his pen, something invisible is forming. A hunger, a discipline, an empire that does not yet exist. Out on the horizon, beneath the soil of Pennsylvania, a strange, dark liquid seeps through rock and sand. Farmers curse it when it ruins their wells. Children play with it, lighting it just to watch it burn blue and wild. No one knows, not yet, that this black, stubborn fluid will fuel cities, factories, wars, and that the quiet boy at the ledger will learn to control it more completely than any man alive. Before long, the clatter of horses will be replaced by the roar of engines, the glow of lamps by electric grids stretching across a continent. And in boardrooms, courtrooms, and smoky backrooms, the Rockefeller name will be whispered with awe, resentment, fear, and reluctant respect. This is the story of a family that turned oil into power, power into money, and money into something far more enduring, influence that outlived its own founders. It is a story of ruthless calculation and almost religious discipline, of philanthropy that built universities and cured diseases, while the poor cursed monopoly, and the press called one man the most hated in America. In the end, we are left with a question as deep as any well. Did the Rockefellers shape America, or did America shape them? Stay with us and step into the shadows and light of the Rockefeller dynasty. If this kind of cinematic journey through history speaks to you, let your support fuel the next story. Your like, your subscription, is another small spark in this vast, electric archive of our shared past. The Boy Who Counted, Roots of an Empire. The first sound is footsteps on wooden boards, slow, careful, almost hesitant. John Davison Rockefeller walks across the small room, each step a quiet protest against the chaos he was born into. Outside, the Ohio wind scrapes along the walls, rattling loose shutters and carrying with it the far-off whistle of a train. Inside, the room smells of starch, tallow candles, and the faint iron tang of ink. On the table before him lies a small tin box. Inside that box are coins, hard, imperfect, worn from other men's hands. Pennies, nickels, a few precious silver pieces. He opens the lid with a care that borders on reverence. One for saving, his mother had told him. Always for saving, John. The Lord blesses the faithful steward. The coins clink softly as he touches them, rearranges them, counts them again, though he has already counted them twice today. He is still a boy, but his face is set in lines that belong to an older man. There is no play in his hands, only purpose. Beyond the window, the sun is sinking into a dirty red sky, painting the clouds with the colors of smoke and rust. Fields lie dark. Chimneys spit out thin columns of gray. America is growing, and growing hurts. His father is not here. William "Big Bill" Rockefeller is somewhere out on the road, calling himself a doctor, selling fake cures from the back of a wagon, charming crowds with easy laughter. He is a man of quick words and quicker disappearances. John has watched his father ride away too many times, dust rising behind the wheels like a curtain closing on a play that never ends well. In the space that his father leaves behind, his mother, Eliza, stands firm as an iron post. She is not loud. She does not complain. She works. She prays. She saves. Her Bible is worn at the edges. Her eyes are tired but steady. Work hard, give to the church. Waste nothing, she tells her children, and never, never trust in luck. John listens. He listens more than he speaks. In the stillness of the evenings, while his siblings sleep, he thinks of his father's wild stories and his mother's quiet rules. Somewhere between those two lives, he begins to build a third one of his own, cold, ordered, balanced like a ledger. He picks up a pencil, TS down at the table and copies numbers onto a scrap of paper. He is practicing the thing that makes sense when people do not. Numbers do not drink. Numbers do not lie. Numbers can be made to behave. Outside, a dog barks. A wagon goes past, wheels creaking. The world feels thin, as if it could be torn open at any moment by a bad harvest, a sickness, a bad debt. The boy at the table understands this in a way children are not supposed to understand. I will not be poor, he whispers into the dimness, though no one is there to hear it. I will not be weak. Years pass. Houses change. The family moves, leaving New York for Ohio, following the slow, uneven pull of opportunity westward. John grows taller but does not grow lighter. Responsibility clings to him like a second skin. School comes easy to him, but not because he has a special gift. It comes easy because he works, and he works because he is afraid of what happens if he does not. On Sundays, he sings hymns, his voice low, his eyes downcast. On weekdays, he studies arithmetic with a devotion that feels almost religious. In crowded classrooms that smell of chalk and damp wool, teachers notice that when other boys grow bored, his attention sharpens. Columns of numbers rise and fall under his pencil, each total made exact, each error hunted down. He likes it. He likes the feeling of everything adding up. Then comes the day when childhood must give way. He is 16 when he puts on his best clothes, a clean shirt, worn but brushed coat, boots rubbed until they almost shine, and goes into Cleveland to find work. The city is not yet the great machine it will become, but to him it feels enormous. Smoke from factories blurs the sky. Horses snort and stamp in the streets. Men shout to one another over the clatter of wagons and the clang of metal. He walks with his jaw clenched, clutching a folded sheet of paper where he has written his record of schooling and skills. His heart bangs in his chest with each door he opens. Any positions for a clerk, a bookkeeper? He asks, over and over, to strangers in dark coats, to men behind counters, to bosses who barely look up. Some laugh, some shrug. Some say, no place for you here, boy, try down the street. The days stack up. Rejection becomes a constant companion. Still, he keeps going, office to office, door to door. There is something hard behind his eyes now, a kind of quiet refusal to go home defeated. Later, he would write that all his future seemed to hinge on those days of search. The hunger in his stomach, the ache in his feet, the cold realization that no one in this city owed him anything. At last, he reaches the offices of Hewitt and Tuttle, commission merchants dealing in grain, meat, and all the everyday goods that feed a growing country. The place smells of flour dust and damp wood, with a sharper edge of sweat and ink. Ledgers sit stacked in careful piles. Men move with purpose. He stands before them, hat in hand, and offers what he has. His schooling, his discipline, his willingness to work. Something in his stillness, his careful words, his serious gaze persuades them. A place is found. A desk is assigned. John D. Rockefeller becomes, at last, what he has trained himself to be, a bookkeeper. That first day, as he sits at the high desk, the world seems to narrow to the lines on the page. His pen scratches softly over paper. He records shipments, payments, debts, and credits. Grain in, money out, meat sold, bills issued. The flow of commerce becomes a river of numbers that he begins to map in his mind. The room hums with low voices, the shuffle of paper, the occasional slam of a door. Outside, wagons unload. Boots thud up and down the stairs. Someone coughs, someone laughs. To John, it all fades into a kind of music, background noise for the clear, cold song of calculation. He watches more than he speaks. He notices which customers are late, which are careless, which pay in full and on time. He sees how small mistakes spread, how waste creeps in at the edges of every business, like damp creeping up a basement wall. He hates waste. At his modest boarding house at night, he copies out columns by lamplight, practicing speed and accuracy. While other young men spend their money on drink or games, he puts away every spare coin. He gives to the church, he writes it down, and then he saves the rest. "Save, John, save," his mother's voice echoes. He obeys, but not only out of duty. He is building something, though even he may not yet see its final shape. On September 26, 1855, his first day at this job, he feels something click into place inside his chest. Later he will call it Job Day and quietly celebrate it each year more faithfully than his own birthday. It is the day the world gave him a place to stand, and he intends to use that place as a lever. Outside, the century is turning toward iron, steam, and speed. Wars and booms and panics lie ahead, and under the ground in the dark rock of Pennsylvania, the oil waits unseen and patient. Soon, the boy who loved numbers will meet the fuel that will light the cities of the world. He is still only a clerk when the first tremors of panic shake the young nation's markets. In 1857, the air in Cleveland's offices turns sharp and brittle with fear. Men talk in hushed voices about failing banks, collapsing railroads, ruined fortunes. Newspapers whisper of panic, of merchants who wake up rich and go to sleep bankrupt. The streets feel different, more hurried, more desperate. Horses snort in the cold as men hurry between counting houses, clutching papers that suddenly feel too light to hold their futures. Inside Hewitt and Tuttle, John D. Rockefeller bends even closer over his ledgers. He watches as customers struggle. Some accounts that once seemed strong begin to crack. Numbers that had marched in straight lines now stutter, break, go red. He learns who survives and who does not and why. Those who borrow too much. Those who spend too easily. Those who live as if the good times will last forever. He takes it all in, writes it down inside himself like another ledger. What works, what fails, what steadiness looks like in a world of sudden storms. At night he kneels by his narrow bed in the boarding house, the smell of cooking grease and damp wood in the air, and prays. He thanks God for his position. He asks for strength, for wisdom, for discipline. And when he rises, he returns to work with the same slow, relentless care as before, but now with an added intensity. Panic has confirmed what he already felt as a child. Nothing is secure unless you make it secure. As confidence returns to the markets, he feels a new pressure building inside. It is not enough to keep another man's books. Not forever. The numbers whisper to him. You could be the one issuing the invoices, not just recording them. You could control the flow, not just track it. In 1859, while he is still young enough to be called boy by older traders, two separate events collide like steel rails crossing. In a field near Titusville, Pennsylvania, Edwin Drake's drill finally strikes oil. The dark liquid rises from the ground in a slow, strange gush. At first, people treat it like a curiosity, even a nuisance. But they discover that when refined properly, it burns with a steady flame, brighter and cleaner than many other fuels. Lamps begin to glow with this new light. Kerosene becomes a word on many tongues. In Cleveland, John hears the news like a distant echo. Oil, a new commodity, unstable, risky, but growing. He notes it, but he does not rush. The boy who counts is not the kind of man to gamble on a rumor. The second event is quieter, but just as important. He decides it is time to become his own master. Together with a partner, Morris Clark, he forms a commission firm, Clark and Rockefeller. The first time his name appears painted on a modest sign, his chest tightens, not with pride exactly, with weight, responsibility. The smell of fresh paint mingles with the dust of the street as he looks up at the letters. This is his now. Success or failure will be written under his name. The office is small, the furniture is plain, but inside those walls a new phase of his life begins. They trade in grain, meat, and other goods. John studies every deal, every shipment, every cent. He is not a loud partner, but he is an exacting one. When others are satisfied with close enough, he demands precision. He rises early. He works late. He keeps his books so neat they could almost be mistaken for printed pages. Meanwhile, he continues his habit of tithing, giving a portion of his modest earnings to church and charity. To him, this is not a contradiction. He believes money is both a trust from God and a tool to be used wisely. He walks the same streets as other young men of his age, past the same taverns, the same places of easy amusement. But if he glances at them at all, it is with cool distance. Every dollar spent today, he thinks, is a dollar that cannot be working for tomorrow. Then the Civil War comes. Cannon fire may be hundreds of miles away, but its echo reaches Cleveland in the form of fear, opportunity, and moral stress. Drums beat. Recruiting officers shout. Lists of the dead begin to appear. John D. Rockefeller does not go to the front. Instead, he hires a substitute, a legal practice at the time. For the rest of his life, some will judge him for this, seeing it as the first proof of a man who lets others bear the risks while he stays in safety. Others will see it as entirely practical, the decision of a young businessman who believes he can serve the nation better at his desk than in a trench. He does help organize supplies, raises money, supports the union cause through his growing network of contacts and resources. Yet always he remains at his post, pen in hand, watching like a hawk as prices soar and crash in the turbulence of war. Amid the conflict, something else grows even faster than the casualty It's the demand for oil. Kerosene lamps light army camps and city streets alike. Factories hum longer into the night. Railroads expand. The country is burning more fuel than ever before, and the crude that bubbles from the Pennsylvania fields needs to be refined somewhere. Cleveland, with its rail lines and waterways, is a promising spot. Rockefeller listens to men talk in offices thick with cigar smoke. He hears them speak of fortunes made and lost almost overnight in drilling wells. Wildcatters boast of new strikes and curse dry holes. Many of them drink heavily, spending as quickly as they earn. The oil fields themselves, from the accounts he hears, are chaos. Mud, noise, shouting, speculation. It is a world that seems built for gamblers, not for him. But there is another side to the oil business, quieter, more controllable. Refining. Taking the unstable crude and turning it into uniform, marketable products. Setting up factories where efficiency, not luck, rules. Finding ways to reduce waste, to use byproducts, to make every barrel yield the most it possibly can. In that word, refining, he hears music. At church meetings and business gatherings, he listens to a man named Samuel Andrews, a self-taught chemist who has been experimenting with refining crude oil. Andrews has the technical knowledge John lacks, and an instinct for how to coax kerosene and other valuable products from the messy, unpredictable flow pulled from the ground. Where others hear only risky speculation, John hears a pattern he can control. Build a refinery near transportation, run it efficiently, buy crude when others are desperate to sell refined products with the calm of a man who knows his costs to the penny. He studies, he asks questions. He visits facilities, the air heavy with the stinging smell of chemicals and smoke, his boots crunching over gravel darkened by spills. Flames leap from open pits. Workers shout over the noise. Barrels roll, iron hoops clanking. The place feels dangerous, half-organized, like a lumbering animal that hasn't yet learned its own shape. He imagines it tamed. He imagines pipes arranged with geometric precision, tanks placed where they should be, losses cut, leaks stopped, everything measured, everything accounted for. In his mind, the wildness of the oil trade becomes a ledger. He sees where the profits lie and where they are wasted. At present, he will later recall, the refining is crude, careless, full of loss. It need not be so. When he brings the idea of investing in refining to his partner, Morris Clark, the conversation is tense. Clark worries about risk, about tying their firm too tightly to a commodity that rises as quickly as it falls. War might end. Demand might drop. Oil could be a passing fever. Rockefeller listens, quietly as always. Then he replies in a calm, level tone that hides the intensity beneath. "This is not a fever," he says. "It is a new age of light." The disagreement does not end there. Over time, fault lines deepen. Where Clark sees danger, Rockefeller sees opportunity, if it is handled with extreme discipline. The strain between them grows until, one day, it breaks. In 1865, they decide to part ways. The firm's assets are put up for auction between them. The room where this occurs is thick with tension. Men shift in their seats. The smell of ink and sweat hangs in the air. The auctioneer's voice is steady, but there is a sense that what happens here will decide more than just the future of one modest business. The bidding begins. Clark puts in his number. Rockefeller responds. The numbers rise. Clark, believing he is about to rid himself of an overserious partner and walk away with a good price, bids higher with a kind of relief. He thinks he is winning. But Rockefeller does not back down. His face remains expressionless, but inside he has already chosen. He will have the whole business or none. He will commit completely or walk away and build anew. There is no middle ground that satisfies him. The final bid falls to him. When the hammer comes down, the sound is like a shot starting a race. John D. Rockefeller walks away the sole master of the enterprise that will soon exist as Rockefeller and Andrews, focused squarely on oil refining. Clark leaves, thinking he has been well paid. Later, he will admit that it was the greatest mistake of his life. On the day the deal is done, John steps out into the Cleveland street. Wagons pass. Smoke drifts low. Somewhere a factory whistle blows. The air smells of coal, of river water, and faintly, already, of oil. He has taken a risk, but not a reckless one. He has studied, weighed, calculated. Now he holds in his hands a small, dangerous, promising piece of a new industry. The boy who counted coins in a tin box now counts in barrels, tanks, and contracts. His world has grown larger, but his habits remain the same. Save, measure, control, expand carefully, but always expand. In the dim light of his office that night, with ledgers open and the sound of distant trains moving through the dark, he touches the page where he has written the figures of the purchase. For a moment, he simply rests his fingers there, feeling the indent of the pen strokes. Then he begins to plan. He plans how to buy crude on favorable terms, how to negotiate with railroads for better rates, how to improve every valve, every pipe, every system in his refinery so that he wastes nothing, not a drop, not a coin, not a chance. Far away, the oil fields flare and roar under the night sky, wild and uncontrolled. Soon they will feel the reach of a quiet man in Cleveland who believes that everything, even chaos, can be refined. And history, though it does not know it yet, is about to meet Standard Oil. Black gold, the rise of Standard Oil. The morning fog lies low over the Cuyahoga River, turning the water into a dull strip of pewter. On its banks, the new refineries crouch like iron beasts, pipes and chimneys jutting into the gray light. Barrels stand in rows, banded in iron, their sides stained dark with leaks that smell sharp and heavy crude oil, half-tamed. In one of these refineries, John D. Rockefeller stands very still. He does not shout. He does not wave his arms. He simply looks. His eyes move from tank to tank, from valve to valve, from the men hauling barrels to the thin plume of smoke escaping from a badly sealed joint. Where another owner might see only industry and noise, he sees loss. Loss in every drip. Loss in every minute a machine sits idle. Loss, and therefore opportunity. Beside him moves Samuel Andrews, wiping his hands on a rag, his fingers stained by chemicals and oil. Andrews talks in a low, eager voice about temperatures and distillation, about how to coax more kerosene from every barrel of crude, how to use the leftover gases, the heavy residues that others simply burn off or dump. They throw it away, Andrews says, pointing to the smoke. They don't know what they're wasting. Rockefeller nods, his face calm, but inside something is quickening. Waste offends him. Waste is sin in numbers. The world is giving him a new kind of chaos. Oil roaring in from Pennsylvania in rusted tanks and wooden barrels, shipped by men who think only of the next fast dollar. But here, in this place of heat and flame, he can impose order. He buys another tank. He hires another man. He studies the books at night, tracing the path of each dollar from crude oil in to kerosene out. He begins to see the outlines of a simple, ruthless idea. If he can lower his costs below everyone else's, if he can move oil more cheaply, refine it more efficiently, sell it more steadily, he will not just survive this booming, unstable industry. He will own it. The oil rush is on. The fields around Titusville and beyond are a forest of derricks. At night, the sky burns with gas flares, the air smells of mud, sweat, and sharp petroleum fumes. Wells come in fast and wild, gushing black streams that coat everything. Men cheer, curse, drink, and make promises in the glare of lanterns. Many of them dream of being kings. But the money, the real money, will not stay in the camps and the drilling fields. It will flow, like the crude itself, toward those who control the next step. Railroads, refineries, markets. In quiet offices far from the mud, Rockefeller invites railroad men to sit at his table. The room is plain, the chairs simple, but the talk is not. The railroads need steady, large shipments. Their tracks crisscross a continent that is still learning how to use them. Empty train cars are wasted money. They are desperate for dependable freight. Rockefeller offers them exactly that. "I can give you more barrels," he says in a voice no louder than it needs to be, "and I can give them to you regularly, if you will give me better rates." In an age before strict laws on competition, the deals he makes are sharp-edged and quiet. Secret rebates, discounts for volume, sometimes even extra payments, the so-called drawbacks, when railroads carry oil for his rivals, money that flows back in part to him. On ledgers in railroad offices, his shipments become a heavy black line that keeps the balance from tipping into red. Somewhere, a clerk at a small refinery sees the new freight rates and feels his stomach drop. His company cannot ship at those prices. He cannot match the terms that this man from Cleveland has squeezed from the iron roads. In the oil regions, small refiners crowd into dim rooms, the air thick with pipe smoke and fear. They talk of one name more and more often. "Rockefeller is trying to squeeze us out," one says, pounding his fist on the table. "He's not trying," another mutters. "He's doing it." But to the workers in Rockefeller's own plants, the story looks different. They see a boss who wants order. He walks the floor in his dark suit while they shovel coal and haul barrels, the heat pressing against their faces like an open oven. He asks questions, notices details, insists on cleanliness in a world that seems built for grime. He raises wages for those who show care. He speaks against drinking, and many resent that. But most of the time, his refineries run when others falter. The pay envelopes arrive when others do not. For many laborers, that is enough. In 1870, after years of quiet expansion, negotiations, and risk, he makes a move that gives a name to the empire he has already begun to build. Standard Oil. The words appear on paper first, written in careful script in the documents that form the new corporation. the Standard Oil Company of Ohio. The idea behind the name is simple and bold. In a wild industry full of dangerous lamps and exploding barrels, Rockefeller wants to promise something different: safety, consistency, reliability. A standard. He gathers partners, Andrews, men from the Clark days, railroad allies, new investors drawn by his calm, relentless record. Together, they fold several refineries into the new company. But though there are many shareholders, there is no doubt who leads. He always seemed to know exactly what he wanted and where he was going. One associate will later recall. Standard Oil's headquarters in Cleveland is not luxurious. The desks are plain, the floors swept. But inside those walls, decisions are made that reach far beyond the city limits. Telegraph wires hum with orders: buy this refinery, secure that route, offer those men stock instead of cash. Bring them into the fold, and if they refuse, well, prices can be lowered, terms can be tightened. Sooner or later, most will bend. In a small refinery on the outskirts of town, a man named Thomas, owner of a family firm, receives a visit. Two gentlemen in dark coats sit across from him at his own table. They speak politely. They praise his skill. Then they unfold their offer. Standard Oil will buy him out. He can join them, invest his money in their growing empire, or hold on and face a future in which a single company can ship, refine, and sell kerosene more cheaply than he ever will. "We mean you no harm," one of the visitors says gently, "but the oil business is changing. The days of small refiners are passing." Thomas looks at the numbers on the neat sheet they slide toward him. His hands shake. Outside, the wind rattles the loose boards of his modest plant. His workers are counting on him. His children are counting on him. He knows, deep down, that the man in Cleveland has already started deciding his fate. More and more across Ohio, Pennsylvania, and beyond, doors like his swing open to similar conversations. Some owners walk away proud but broken, their chimneys soon cold. Others sign, cash the check, and later, to their own surprise, prosper on Standard Oil stock. Still others join the company, trading independence for a seat at a growing table. The barrels keep rolling. The chimneys keep smoking. The black river of oil flows ever more firmly through the hands of one organization: Standard Oil. Behind that name, behind the quiet offices and the humming telegraph lines, stands the same man who once counted coins in a tin box, now counting in whole markets. And somewhere, far beyond Cleveland, in state capitals and newspaper offices, people begin to ask a new question in uneasy tones. How much power is too much for one company to hold? The year is 1872, and a strange stillness settles over Cleveland, one that comes before the tearing of fabric, before the rending of an industry. They will call it the Cleveland Massacre. But massacres need not involve gunfire. Sometimes the weapon is a contract. Sometimes the battlefield is a counting house. Sometimes the killing blow is a number whispered across a railroad desk. It begins with a secret alliance. The railroads, three major lines competing for the mighty torrent of oil traffic, meet quietly with Standard Oil. Their freight rates are suffering, undercut by each other's desperate grabbing for business. They want stability. Rockefeller wants advantage. A pact is struck, a cooperative known as the South Improvement Company. Its purpose is simple, brutal, and elegant. Standard Oil will receive deeply discounted shipping rates. Its competitors will pay higher rates, and for every barrel other refiners ship, Standard Oil will quietly receive a rebate. In essence, Rockefeller will be paid when his rivals work. No law forbids this. No regulation stops it. In this era of iron and steam, power belongs to those who can negotiate it. When the contracts are finalized, Rockefeller holds them in his hands like a weapon forged specifically for him. The ink glistens. The figures are precise. It is the kind of advantage that can remake an industry overnight. And it nearly does. Because as soon as these rates become known, before they even go into effect, the refineries of Cleveland erupt in a storm of outrage and fear. Meetings fill smoky rooms late into the night. Men pace, fists slam against tables, voices crack with desperation. "If this stands," one refiner cries, "we're finished, every one of us. They'll ship cheaper, they'll sell cheaper, we can't compete. They want the whole city." All eyes turn to the man who has never raised his voice, never threatened, but has maneuvered with a subtlety none of them fully grasped until now. Rockefeller. The outrage spreads to the oil regions themselves. Teamsters march. Wells are shut down in protest. Newspapers print headlines in heavy black letters. The public fumes. Politicians claim ignorance. The uproar is so fierce that within months the South Improvement Company collapses under pressure before a single rebate is ever paid. But though the public sees this as a victory, inside Cleveland the real story continues. Because while men shouted in anger, Rockefeller moved silently. He knew this storm was coming. He knew panic makes men desperate, and desperate men sign. Throughout the uproar, Standard Oil representatives visit other refiners quietly, always quietly. They bring no threats, only numbers, logic, inevitability. "You've seen what the railroads are willing to offer us," they say. "You know which way the tide is turning. We can buy your refinery at a fair price. You can join us, or you can hold out and hope the next storm is kinder." And one by one, under the weight of fear and uncertainty, Cleveland refiners agree. Some sign with relief, feeling protected at last from the chaos of the oil trade. Some sign with bitterness, knowing their independence is slipping away like sand. Some refuse, and find themselves unable to ship profitably, unable to buy crude on good terms, unable to compete with the scale and efficiency that Standard Oil now commands. By the end of the year, Rockefeller controls nearly every refinery in the city. The trains begin to feel it first. Freight masters along the Lake Shore and Pennsylvania lines begin noticing that more and more of their tank cars bear the same stenciled destination, the same invoices, the same signature at the bottom of the contract. Standard Oil shipments move with the smooth certainty of a river carved into stone, and other refiners' shipments, once steady, shrink into scattered trickles. In the telegraph rooms, operators tap out messages with uneasy glances at one another. Rate SECURED, shipment guaranteed. Standard requests priority on westbound line. The railroads oblige. They cannot afford not to. Rockefeller's barrels fill their cars, stabilize their earnings, and keep their tracks humming. He offers what few others can: predictability. In exchange, he asks for nothing dramatic, only the slow tightening of terms that nudge his competitors toward the edge of the cliff. Meanwhile, the city of Cleveland begins to glow with an amber haze each evening as more refineries come quietly under Standard Oil's control. Each new acquisition is folded neatly into the system, inefficiencies removed, workers reorganized, byproducts reclaimed. Every barrel yields more kerosene. Every ounce of waste is tracked and minimized. Visitors to the headquarters note the quiet hum of efficiency. Nothing is grand, nothing is wasted. A traveling merchant later recalls walking into Rockefeller's office expecting grandeur, and instead finding a desk so plain it could have belonged to a schoolteacher. John looked up briefly, nodded, and returned to the figures in front of him. The merchant said later, "It was like interrupting a surgeon mid-operation. The man worked with numbers the way others work with scalpels." But outside those calm walls, resentment begins to bubble like overheated crude. Small refiners meet in taverns and town halls, their voices rising over the clatter of mugs and the creak of wooden floors. "He's bleeding us dry," a man in a soot-blackened jacket growls in one meeting. "Those rebates, those infernal rebates, how can anyone compete with a man who gets paid when we ship our own oil? He's using the railroads to crush us. another shouts. They say they're just following the market, but it's his market. And yet, even in their anger, they cannot ignore a bitter truth. Rockefeller's kerosene is cheaper. His refining methods produce fewer impurities. His barrels leak less. Customers prefer his product. He is beating them not only with power, but with consistency. His chosen word, standard, becoming more literal by the day. In Pennsylvania's oil towns, the chaos continues. Wells gush unexpectedly, drowning men in black fountains. Others sputter out within weeks, leaving investors ruined. Streets churn with mud and spilled crude, giving rise to a landscape that smells fiercely of ambition and desperation. Journalists describe the region as a frantic carnival with oil for blood. Rockefeller watches from Cleveland with a calm, calculating detachment. He invests not in wells, too uncertain, but in refineries and transport. He lets other men gamble on striking gold. He chooses instead to control what happens after the gold is struck. And in this strategy lies his genius. By 1872, rumors begin spreading of something larger than mere competition, a coordinated move by refiners and railroads to shape the entire industry. Whispers of confidential contracts circulate. Men speak of a mysterious group calling itself the South Improvement Company. When the details leak, the nation gasps. A handful of refiners, chief among them Standard Oil, have negotiated with major railroads to secure secret rebates and even drawbacks on competitors' shipments. According to the leaked papers, every time an independent ships oil, a portion of the fee quietly returns to Rockefeller. It is more than an advantage, it is a stranglehold. Newspapers explode with outrage. Monstrous conspiracy against the oil trade. A scheme to crush the independents. A secret empire rising in Cleveland. In Titusville, the reaction is volcanic. Hundreds of oil men gather in a barn, the smell of sawdust and crude thick in the air. Lanterns cast hard shadows on furious faces. One man slams a fist into his palm. Rockefeller means to own us all. If we let him, there'll be no oil business left except his. Voices erupt in agreement. Some call for boycotts, others for violence. Into this storm comes Rockefeller, not in person but in effect. As tension peaks, Standard Oil moves swiftly, quietly, with a precision that seems almost pre-planned. Agents approach independent refiners with offers. Sell out now, join us, take your payment in peace. Or face a war of prices you cannot win. Some resist, some fold, some with trembling hands sign deals they swore they never would. The South Improvement scheme ultimately collapses under public pressure, the government intervening before the arrangement can take full effect. The company is dissolved, its name cursed in oil towns for years. But by the time the smoke clears, something unexpected has happened. Rockefeller, publicly scolded but privately prepared, has used the panic to accelerate his acquisitions. Many independents, terrified of what nearly happened, have already sold to him. His empire, instead of shrinking, swells. By the mid-1870s, Standard Oil controls nearly every refinery in Cleveland. The city's skyline changes, not upward but outward, as refinery smoke clouds merge into a single drifting veil. A journalist visiting the region writes, "Cleveland no longer refines oil. Standard Oil refines oil, and Cleveland is its instrument. Behind every contract, behind every price cut, behind every negotiation stands the same silent force. John D. Rockefeller, pen in hand, spine straight, eyes unblinking. He says little publicly. He grants few interviews. But in boardrooms and private meetings, he speaks with the certainty of a man who believes he is not merely winning a game, he is perfecting it. And yet, in the distance, on the horizon of the American consciousness, something begins to shift. People start to whisper words like monopoly, danger, too much, too fast. And soon, those whispers will grow into accusations. The kind that echo in courtrooms. The kind that shake empires. The kind that even Rockefeller cannot ignore. The numbers keep climbing. In report after report laid out on long wooden tables, the same patterns appear. More refineries acquired, more rival brands folded into the same quiet, relentless machine. Lines on maps trace Standard Oil's reach from Cleveland outward, to Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New York, Baltimore, the Great Lakes, the seaboard. Tank cars bearing the company's shipments snake across the rails like iron-black veins. By the late 1870s, the figures are staggering. Standard Oil controls nearly 90% of the refining capacity in Cleveland. Soon, it will control most of the refining in the country. The very phrase oil business begins to sound, in the mouths of many, like a synonym for Rockefeller. Inside the company, life takes on a rhythm that feels almost military. Clerks arrive early, the air still cool, ink bottles lined up like soldiers. They copy figures into ledgers, answer telegrams, reconcile account after account with a speed and accuracy that mirrors their employer's habits. In one office, a young clerk named Henry remembers watching Rockefeller walk past his desk without a word, only a brief nod, yet feeling as if a furnace of concentration had passed by. In that moment, Henry would later say, you understood that carelessness was a sin. In the refineries, foremen bark instructions over the roar of furnaces and the hiss of steam. Workers in stained shirts move in practiced patterns, as valves open and close, as flowing crude is split into kerosene, lubricants, paraffin, and more. What others had treated as waste, Standard Oil learns to sell. Candles, petroleum jelly, lubricating oils for machines. Even the gases that once burned uselessly into the air are studied for potential use. Every byproduct found a market. Every corner of the barrel was turned into money. The profits roll in like a rising tide, but Rockefeller does not change his outwar. Habits. He still bargains fiercely over prices, still counts pennies, still travels in plain clothes with simple luggage, still teaches his children thrift and Sunday school lessons. He is not a king in marble halls. He is a superintendent of a vast, invisible factory that happens to span a continent. And yet, beyond his walls, the world is beginning to look at him differently. Cartoonists in distant cities begin drawing his silhouette looming over railroads and wells, his hands wrapped around the globe, squeezing. Headlines mutter about the oil octopus. Straight lines on maps start to look to the public like grasping tentacles. In some places, Standard Oil's presence feels like a blessing. Prices for kerosene, once wildly unstable, fall and stay low. Poor families who used to ration their lamp oil carefully can now afford steady light in their homes. Streets are brighter. Shops stay open later. The dark shrinks back a little from the edges of American life. In those homes, when someone curses Standard Oil, another might say, whatever they are, their oil is cheap and it burns clean. Gratitude and suspicion live side by side. In other places, especially in oil regions and small towns once proud of their independent refineries, the mood is sour. At what cost? Men ask in barbershops, in train stations, in the back pews of churches. If one company controls all the oil, what happens when they decide to raise the price again? What happens when they decide who can live and who must close? The word trust enters the national vocabulary in a new, heavy way, not the trust between people, but the trust as a legal creature. A group of companies knit together under a handful of trustees, hiding their unity behind separate names. In 1882, to manage his far-reaching empire, Rockefeller agrees to a structure that will become a symbol of his age, the Standard Oil Trust. Instead of direct ownership scattered in confusing fragments, the properties are placed under the control of a board of trustees, with Rockefeller as its guiding force. On paper, the companies may still look distinct. In reality, they move as one. That same year, in a small house in Pennsylvania, a young woman named Ida Tarbell reads the newspapers and hears the men in her life talk about Standard Oil with a bitterness that stings her ears. Her father, an independent oil man, has lived through the boom and the squeeze, the excitement and the slow suffocation. She watches the way his jaw tightens when the name Rockefeller is mentioned. She sees the way his friends' eyes cloud over when they talk about what has been lost. To her, the oil business is not an abstract debate. It is the smell of crude on her father's clothes, the sight of neighbors ruined, the sudden appearance of one company's name on nearly every important decision. Somewhere between Cleveland and that small Pennsylvania house, a line is drawn, a line between the builder and the observer, the man who sees his work as discipline and progress, and the young woman who will one day see it as something dangerously close to tyranny. For now, Rockefeller continues to build. He wakes early. He exercises, walks, plays a little billiards, prays. Then he goes back to the figures, the deals, the plans. He talks about cooperation where others might say conquest. He believes, truly believes, that he is rationalizing an industry, removing waste, providing a public good. In his mind, the many small, fragile refineries of the past are like scattered lanterns in a storm. He has built a lighthouse. But storms do not vanish just because one man believes he has ordered the sea. The nation is changing. Railroads, steel, telegraphs, and great corporations are weaving a new web over the landscape. Alongside admiration for progress rises a new kind of fear, that power is slipping from towns and state houses into boardrooms no voter can enter. In those years, some politicians begin to murmur about the need for laws to restrain the trusts. Some journalists begin to dig deeper, to ask harder questions. And somewhere at a desk piled with notes and clippings, Ida Tarbell sharpens her pen. The giant of oil has risen, calm and methodical, reshaping an entire industry in his own image. For a time, he has written his own rules. But in the next of his story, those rules will be challenged, in newspapers, in public opinion, and finally, under the hard light of a courtroom. The 1880s arrive with a hum of electricity in the air, literal electricity beginning to flicker through American cities, and political electricity crackling through debates about corporate power. Standard Oil, now a titan stretching across states, oceans, and markets, moves with the quiet certainty of a machine that has perfected itself. But beneath that steady exterior, pressure is building. Not from within, from the world closing in around it. The whispers become a roar. It begins with journalists. A headline in a New York paper. The Colossus of Cleveland. Another in Chicago. Is one man master of our markets? The cartoons grow harsher. Rockefeller as a giant squeezing refineries in his fist. Rockefeller as an octopus, tentacles wrapped around Congress, the railroads, the nation. The drawings are exaggerated, even ridiculous, but their impact is not. In quiet parlors and busy factories alike, people look at those images and wonder whether they are metaphors or warnings. Meanwhile, competitors who once nursed private grudges begin to speak publicly. One former refinery owner tells a reporter, "Standard Oil did not buy us, it consumed us. We were fuel for its fire." A merchant in Philadelphia adds, "You cannot compete with a man who decides the price of the rail you ship on, the barrel you buy, and the oil you sell." The tension is no longer regional, it is national. Rockefeller calm in the storm. And yet in his office, John D. Rockefeller remains as composed as ever. He continues to sign letters in his narrow script, continues to meet quietly with partners, continues to calculate the future of markets with that same boyhood precision. If he reads the papers, he rarely comments. If he sees the cartoons, he gives no sign. But something in him begins to tighten. He has always believed deeply, almost religiously, that efficiency is a moral good, waste is sin, Disorder is danger. Competition to him is chaos. Cooperation is civilization. So when he hears attacks on Standard Oil, he does not hear accusations of unfair dealing. He hears misunderstandings. He hears the public resisting the very order he has spent his life creating. "We do what other men could do if they would work as we work," he tells a colleague. But outside his circle, the ground is shifting fast. Ida Tarbell's first notes. In Pennsylvania, Ida Tarbell begins gathering her first files. She visits her father's old workshop. She sits at kitchen tables with men whose refineries went dark. She listens to their voices, some trembling with anger, others with resignation. "Rockefeller ruined me. He ruined everyone. He could have worked with us. He chose to bury us." She takes down every word in her steady hand. The smell of crude oil clings to the objects she handles: old ledgers, broken valve pieces, faded company letters. She touches them with the same focused intensity Rockefeller once applied to his own papers. Ida, unlike Rockefeller, is not building an empire. She is building a case. The empire extends its reach. Meanwhile, Standard Oil continues to grow. Pipelines snake across states, cutting into the profits of the railroads that once strengthened Rockefeller's rise. Coastal facilities expand as kerosene becomes a global commodity. Ships bearing the company's cargoes steam toward Europe, Latin America, Asia. From London, a trader writes, "American oil, Standard's oil, is becoming the light of the world. Cost after cost is driven lower. Error after error is erased. Rockefeller's managers report back with the precision of generals describing battlefield conditions, improvements, weaknesses, opportunities." And yet, even within this success, shadows lengthen. Some refiners still cling to independence, fighting year after year against price cuts designed to force their hand. Farmers, groups condemn Standard Oil's influence over local markets. Politicians feel the sting of public anger and begin murmuring about federal action. Rockefeller senses this shift like a change in atmospheric pressure. He becomes more private. He withdraws from day-to-day management, delegating more decisions to his trusted inner circle. Yet his influence remains unmistakable, felt in memos, in directives, in the tone of every strategy discussion. The old intensity is still there, sharpened by years of scrutiny. A nation takes notice. In 1887, the U.S. government creates the Interstate Commerce Commission, the first major federal attempt to regulate railroads and, indirectly, companies like Standard Oil. Though the law has many weaknesses, its existence signals something new. The government is beginning to awaken to the power of industrial giants. Then in 1890, Congress passes the Sherman Antitrust Act, a law aimed directly at monopolies. At first it seems toothless. Few prosecutions follow. Standard Oil continues its ascent. But the ground beneath Rockefeller is no longer as solid as it once was. The law hangs over him like a distant thundercloud, not yet breaking, but growing darker. Cracks in the armor. Inside Standard Oil, executives begin whispering privately about the danger of public perception. Some urge Rockefeller to soften the company's tactics, to avoid the appearance of coercion. Others beg him to grant interviews, to show the world a human face behind the name. He refuses most requests. "I have work to do," he says simply. By the mid-1890s, however, something else begins to change. Something more personal, more unsettling. John D. Rockefeller starts losing his hair. A condition triggered by stress, cry. Tics say. He appears in public wearing a soft gray cap, his once dark beard now flecked with white, his face thinner, almost ghostly. Reporters comment on his new look with fascination and cruelty. A woman in a New York crowd whispers upon seeing him. He looks like a man haunted. But his gaze remains sharp. His voice remains steady. Even weakened by illness, he moves with the same calm purpose. The quiet before the strike. By the end of the 1890s, Standard Oil stands as one of the most powerful corporations in world history. Its reach is global. Its efficiency is unparalleled. Its wealth is beyond imagining. But all empires, no matter how disciplined, cast shadows. And in one New York office, Ida Tarbell organizes her notes for a series of articles she will publish in McClure's magazine. Articles that will ignite the public imagination, turn the nation against Standard Oil, and shape the next decade of Rockefeller's life. Her pencil hovers over the paper. She writes one word at the top of the page. Standard. And in Cleveland, on a quiet estate far from the Pennsylvania fields where he first heard of oil, John D. Rockefeller feels, not fear exactly, but a tightening in his chest. A sense that the era he built is about to be challenged. A storm is coming. Not of crude or fire or financial panic. A storm of words. A storm of truth or accusation or both. And once unleashed, it will not be contained. The giant on trial, power, outrage, and the breaking of Standard Oil. At the turn of the 20th century, the world feels smaller and louder. Railroad whistles slice through morning fog, telegraph wires hum with ceaseless chatter, newspapers slam onto doorsteps with fresh black ink and sharpened words. America is beginning to recognize its own reflection in the polished glass of office towers and the black sheen of factory floors, and not everyone likes what they see. In New York City, on a winter morning in 1902, a woman sits at a desk piled high with notes, letters, and clippings. The windows rattle softly with the rumble of carriages outside. The office smells of stale smoke and ink. Her name is Ida Tarbell, and she is about to light a fuse. She smooths a sheet of paper with steady fingers. Her pen hovers for a heartbeat, then bites into the page. The history of the growth of the Standard Oil Company, she writes, is a history of money and power and force. Each sentence that follows draws on years of observation, interviews, and quiet anger. She remembers her father's ruined hopes, the independents driven to the wall, the whispered stories of secret contracts and ruthless price wars. She has traced the threads, followed the money, compared the dates, the deals, the carefully hidden arrangements. She is not interested in rumor. She is interested in proof. Across the city, the offices of McClure's magazine thrum with energy. Editors pace. Compositors set type. There is a sense, not fully formed, that something large is about to be loosed upon the public. The first installment of her series, The History of the Standard Oil Company, is printed, folded, bound, and bundled. Crates of magazines are loaded onto wagons, ferried across rivers, stacked in train cars. The smell of fresh paper and ink fills the air as they begin their journey into homes, barbershops, train stations, and waiting rooms. When those pages are opened, the quiet work of one woman becomes a chorus of voices. Tarbell's prose is surgical and calm, but beneath its cool surface runs a current of moral outrage. She does not shout. She does not indulge in wild accusations. She simply lays out, step by step, how Standard Oil grew, the secret rebates, the South Improvement Scheme, the harsh treatment of stubborn competitors, the cozy agreements with railroads, the way cooperation often meant surrender under pressure. She quotes letters, she cites dates, she names names. Readers, used to hearing only fragments of rumor, now see the pattern whole. In oil towns, old men who had nearly given up trying to explain what happened to them feel their throats tighten as they read. Yes, one says softly in a Pennsylvania kitchen, tapping the page with a calloused finger. Yes, that's how it was. In cities, where Standard Oil's low prices and bright kerosene lamps had long been taken as simple facts of modern life, people begin to look up from their magazines with furrowed brows. So this, they murmur, is the cost of cheap light. In Cleveland and New York, in the upper offices of Standard Oil, The reaction is colder. Copies of the magazine land on polished desks. Executives leaf through the pages, their faces hardening. Some dismiss Tarbell as a sentimentalist, a woman with a personal grudge. Others, more thoughtful, feel a prickle of unease, because they recognize the events she describes. In a quiet room, John D. Rockefeller, now older, thinner, hair mostly gone, sits with a copy of McClure's before him. The lamp above casts a circle of RM light on his hands. He turns the pages slowly. On his face there is no storm, only a tightening around the eyes. To him, this account is not the story of villainy. It is the story of a man who saw an industry in chaos and bent it toward order and efficiency. He believes, and will always believe, that he did what had to be done. But Tarbell's words have given his critics something they never had before: a carefully documented narrative, a spine on which public anger can hang its flesh. In state capitals and in Washington, lawmakers take notice. The Sherman Antitrust Act, passed years earlier and mostly dormant, begins to feel less like a symbol and more like a tool. Reformers, emboldened by the rising tide of muckraking journalism, press for action. They speak of trusts that control steel, rail, meat, yet over and over one name is mentioned first: Standard Oil. In courtrooms and hearing chambers, witnesses begin to testify. The atmosphere is heavy with cigar smoke and expectation. Men who once made quiet deals in back offices now sit rigid under the gaze of judges and reporters. A former refinery owner describes how he was approached by Standard agents and offered a choice that did not feel like a choice at all. A railroad official explains the structure of rebates and drawbacks, his voice strained as he admits how secretive the arrangements were. Each testimony adds another brushstroke to the portrait Tarbell has drawn. Meanwhile, outside those rooms, the nation reads. Factory workers, farm wives, clerks, and students pass dog-eared copies of McClure's from hand to hand. Boarding house tables, where once the talk was of baseball scores or the weather, now ring with arguments about monopoly and fairness. Is he a genius or a tyrant? Someone asks. Can a man be both? Someone else replies. Through it all, Rockefeller remains distant, almost spectral. He appears in public less often now. When he does, he wears simple clothes and that soft cap, his beard trimmed close, his movements measured. Reporters attempt to draw him into comment. He responds with a few guarded words about having retired from active control, about his interest in charitable work, about his faith. He does not rise to defend himself in the press against Tarbell's charges. Perhaps he thinks the work speaks for itself. Perhaps he underestimates the power of narrative. Perhaps, after decades of command, he simply does not know how to plead. But the world is changing. In this new age, stories can move governments. And soon the government moves. In 1906, the United States files suit against the Standard Oil Company under the Sherman Antitrust Act, alleging that it has systematically restrained trade and created an unlawful monopoly. The case will wind its way upward, through lower courts and appeals, until it reaches the highest tribunal in the land, the Supreme Court of the United States. There, beneath high ceilings and carved wood, under the grave eyes of the justices, the decades of deals and discounts, acquisitions and absorptions will be weighed, not as clever business, but as possible crimes against the very idea of fair competition. The giant of oil, once answerable only to markets and shareholders, now finds itself facing a different kind of judgment. One rendered not in ledgers, but in law. The courtroom is silent. Not the comfortable silence of an empty hall, but the charged, breath-holding quiet of a nation leaning in. Marble pillars rise like frozen witnesses. Sunlight falls through tall windows in thin, pale beams, illuminating dust motes that drift like suspended time. Reporters fill the back rows, their notebooks open, pencils poised. Every seat is taken. Every breath feels deliberate. This is not just a trial. It is a reckoning. Before the Supreme Court of the United States, the government argues that Standard Oil is a monopoly so vast, so disciplined, and so strategically woven into the nation's infrastructure that no competitor can reasonably survive outside its shadow. The phrases used are crisp, legal, carefully measured, but beneath them runs a current of moral urgency. The defendant, one attorney declares, has made competition a mathematical impossibility. He gestures toward documents piled high, contracts, letters, shipping records, maps of pipeline networks, pricing charts that dip and rise with suspicious synchronicity. The courtroom feels colder as these pages flip, revealing a pattern that took decades to build and only months to unravel once exposed to public scrutiny. Standard Oil's counsel rises next. He speaks with precision, arguing that the company has lowered prices, improved quality, and stabilized a once chaotic industry. His voice is calm, almost pleading for reason. If this is wrong, he says, then efficiency itself is on trial. Some spectators nod, others frown, but everyone feels the weight of the question: can a company be punished for being too good at what it does? Rockefeller watches from F.R. John D. Rockefeller is not in the room. He sits many miles away in his estate in Forest Hill or at the Evergreens house in New York, reading newspapers delivered daily in neat stacks. His hair is gone. His beard has thinned. His frame, once firm with the posture of relentless discipline, has softened with age and illness. But his eyes, those sharp, unwavering eyes, still burn with the clarity of a man who sees patterns where others see noise. He reads how the public gasps at the numbers presented in court. He reads how Ida Tarbell's words are quoted beside witness statements. He reads how lawmakers debate whether a corporation can wield power that rivals states. His fingers tighten on the paper. For decades, he controlled markets the way a conductor controls an orchestra, every rate, every barrel, every refinery timed to his internal rhythm. Now, that rhythm is being rewritten by strangers in robes who do not know the oil fields, who do not know the terror of financial panics, who do not understand how fragile early industry truly was. He believed he had saved it. They believe he has smothered it. Witnesses rise one by one. Back in Washington, one witness after another takes the stand. An independent refiner, older now, his hands trembling slightly, tells the justices about how Standard Oil cut prices in his region to levels he could not match, only to raise them again once he sold out. A railroad official confesses that his company offered secret rebates because Standard Oil promised vast volumes. It was business, he says, hard business but business. The courtroom stirs. A woman in the gallery whispers to her neighbor. The justices remain stone-faced, but their pens scratch across paper. Then come the economists, men with graphs and theories, explaining concepts of restraint, dominance, and market suffocation. Their language is abstract, but the meaning is not. Standard Oil has grown too large to coexist peacefully with genuine competition. And somewhere behind these testimonies, like a ghostly chorus, echoes the voice of Ida Tarbell. Not present, not testifying, yet everywhere. Her series has given shape to the public's anger, coherence to decades of scattered complaints. Her pen dragged what happened in darkened offices into the bright, unforgiving light of national judgment. In quiet moments, even Standard Oil's defenders admit, without her, there might be no case at all. The court's deliberation. Months pass. The justices read thousands of pages. They review contracts yellowed with age, diagrams of pipeline routes, transcripts of rival companies swallowed whole. They consider what it means for one company to control nearly every step, from the wellhead to the lamp. Outside the court, protesters gather. Some carry signs condemning monopoly, Others champion Rockefeller as a self-made hero whose efficiency made America brighter. The air smells of smoke, cold rain, and the tension of a country debating its own future. In cities, saloons fill with heated arguments. On farms, neighbors discuss the trial over supper by lamplight, lamps still burning Standard Oil kerosene. In schools, teachers use the case to explain the power of corporations. On Wall Street, brokers watch nervously, fearing what might come if the trust dissolves. Everywhere, people ask variations of the same question. Should any man or any company wield this much power? The verdict. On May 15, 1911, the decision is announced. The courtroom is packed. Reporters grip their pencils. A wave of stillness rolls through the crowd. The Supreme Court rules that Standard Oil has violated the Sherman Antitrust Act. Their words land like a hammer strike. Unreasonable restraints of trade. Abuse of dominant position. Must be dissolved. The trust is ordered to break into 34 independent companies. When the news reaches the street outside, a strange mixture of cheers and uneasy murmurs rises. Some celebrate as though a tyrant has fallen. Others fear instability. Markets tremble for a moment, then surge, because investors realize something Rockefeller already suspects. Breaking the pieces apart may only make them more valuable. Rockefeller's reaction. In his home, John D. Rockefeller receives the news. He is quiet for a long time. A secretary watching him later recalls that he did not curse, did not shout, did not sigh. He simply folded the newspaper, set it aside, and said softly, "Right, then we turn the page." Was it resignation, acceptance, a strategist seeing new angles instead of defeat? Perhaps all three. Privately, he feels a sting, not of money, but of judgment. For decades, he believed he had built an orderly system that benefited the nation. Now the highest court has declared that system dangerous. But when the dust settles, something extraordinary happens. Stock in the newly separated companies, Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, and many others yet unnamed, skyrockets. Rockefeller, who owns roughly a quarter of the trust, becomes not poorer but the wealthiest man in modern history. The court broke his empire, but in doing so scattered seeds that grew faster than before. A nation divided, a man transformed. Across the United States, people debate whether justice was done. Some say the decision saved competition. Some say it punished excellence. Some say it changed nothing at all. Rockefeller, having stepped back from active leadership years before, now transitions into an even quieter phase of life, a phase not of building, but of giving. Hospitals, universities, medical research, public health campaigns. The man once called the oil octopus begins shaping a different legacy, one funded by the immense wealth crystallized in the aftermath of the breakup. But even as he shifts toward philanthropy, the shadow of Standard Oil lingers. The trial, the verdict, the decades of domination, the fire of Ida Tarbell's pen. The story is far from over. For now, the giant has fallen. But the echoes of his footsteps still shake the American landscape. He begins to disappear from the world he once dominated. No more long days at the office. No more surprise visits to refineries. No more late-night sessions over ledgers under gaslight. John D. Rockefeller steps back from the clang and roar of industry and into a quieter landscape of lawns, verandas, and carefully tended gardens. On summer mornings, he walks along gravel paths lined with trimmed hedges, the crunch of stones under his shoes a far cry from the rumble of tank cars and the hiss of steam. Birds call from the trees. Gardeners move silently among the flowers, pruning, watering, shaping. He carries a cane now, more as a symbol than a necessity, and wears simple suits that blend wealth with modesty. To the public, however, he is anything but modest. He is a symbol of excess, of power grown too vast, of the frightening new reality of corporations that seem to stand above nations. Cartoonists still draw him as an octopus, his long arms gripping pipelines, railroads, even the Capitol dome. In sermons and speeches, his name is invoked as a warning. Yet the man himself, in his later years, seems almost gentle. He plays golf, though his swing is stiff. He hands out shiny dimes to children, a habit that becomes famous enough to feel like myth. In small towns and seaside resorts, people gather at a distance to watch him pass, whispering, "That's him, that's Rockefeller." Some approach nervously. He smiles, asks about their families, presses a coin into a small palm. To some, it feels like kindness. To others, like something stranger, a giant trying to make himself small. The distance between his inner world and his public image is enormous. Inside, he measures his life not only in profits, but in what he believes those profits made possible. The creation of order where there was chaos, the bringing of light where there was darkness, the ability to fund causes he now considers more important than oil. Outside, many remember only the closed refineries, the vanished independence, the courtroom verdict that broke the trust he built. The newspapers move on to new scandals, new titans, new outrages, steel, railroads, meat packing. But the Standard Oil case remains a landmark, a reference point in every debate over monopoly and fairness. In classrooms, children learn his name alongside the words trust and antitrust. Some teachers describe him with a tone of admiration, a master of business. Others with unease, a man who had too much. Meanwhile, Rockefeller's attention turns increasingly toward something else. Giving. He funds the University of Chicago, transforming a modest Baptist college into a major institution. He establishes the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, where scientists will seek cures for diseases that stalk the poor and wealthy alike. He supports efforts in public health, fighting hookworm in the American South, malaria abroad, and other invisible enemies that steal years quietly instead of in explosions of drama. In offices far from refineries, new kinds of ledgers are kept. They do not track barrels and rebates. They track grants, research results, lives improved. To many who pass through the doors of hospitals and universities bearing his name, Rockefeller is not a monster or a saint. He is simply there, a presence in stone and endowments, a silent benefactor whose oil money has been translated into books, microscopes, scholarships, clean water. Yet the question lingers, like the smell of kerosene in an old warehouse. Can charity ever truly balance the scales of power? Ida Tarbell, having helped bring his empire to heel, watches this transformation with a complex mix of satisfaction and doubt. She does not regret her work. She believes that shining light on Standard Oil was necessary. But she also sees the new world taking shape, a world where private fortunes, once built in the shadows, now shape public institutions. The form of power has changed. Its reach has not. In the evenings, as the sun sinks behind manicured trees, Rockefeller sometimes sits in a wicker chair and watches the sky burn orange, much like the flares once burned over the oil fields of Pennsylvania. He is old now. The years of crisis and conquest lie behind him. The gears of industry continue to turn without his hand on the lever. He has outlived his greatest battles. He has outlived many of his enemies. He has become, in some ways, a myth in his own lifetime. But the story of the Rockefeller name is no longer only his. In offices on Wall Street and in the quiet rooms of foundation trustees, a new generation is learning how to manage not oil but influence. Stocks in the companies born from Standard Oil's breakup grow. Board seats multiply. The family's wealth, even as John gives massive sums away, remains immense. The oil empire may have been fractured, but the Rockefeller dynasty is very much alive, ready to step from the roaring age of kerosene into the softer, more shadowed realm of banking, foundations, and the subtle steering of institutions. Behind the closed doors of drawing rooms and boardrooms, behind the polished wood of conference tables, anew begins. Not the story of how one man seized an industry, but how his name will be used to shape the levers of finance, philanthropy, and global influence for decades to come. The refineries still burn. The pipelines still hum. But the family's gaze is turning toward marble halls and quiet signatures that move not just oil, but the very currents of power. From oil to influence, the banking of a dynasty. The age of smoke and derricks is fading. In its place rises a different landscape, stone, glass, and marble. The clamor of refineries and rail yards softens into the muted rustle of papers turned in quiet rooms, the soft thud of ledgers closing, the echo of footsteps down the polished corridors of banks and foundations. Oil has done its work. Now the money it produced begins to move in other ways. On a gray morning in New York, the city already restless and vertical, a car pulls up to a building of pale stone and tall windows. Its steps are worn by the tread of lawyers, bankers, and brokers, men who carry the weight of companies in their briefcases. Inside, the air smells of ink leather and the faint metallic tang of coins and keys. Somewhere on an upper floor, away from the public, the Rockefeller interests are being quietly arranged. It is no longer a matter of how many barrels of oil leave Cleveland or how many tank cars cross Pennsylvania. Those days, the days when every valve and pipe could be inspected by the man at the top, are gone. The empire has splintered into dozens of companies, each with its own board, its own officers, its own reports. But the stock, the ownership, the influence that has not splintered, it has simply changed shape. A handful of trusted advisors sit around a polished table spread with papers, charts of shareholdings, lists of directors, notes on banks in which the family's fortune is now deeply rooted. The talk is not of oil prices but of interest rates, bond issues, currency, and the slow, subtle currents that move markets. The Rockefeller name now appears not only on refinery lists and shipping logs, but on the rosters of banks and investment houses, Standard Oil's successor companies, railroads, utilities, and new ventures that will define the 20th century economy. The dynasty is learning a new language, capital. In Cleveland and New York, the family office, sometimes called with understated simplicity, the room, becomes the brain of a complex financial body. Here, lawyers and accountants, discreet and controlled, watch over the holdings like priests tending an altar. They do not shout, they do not boast, they record. Assets, dividends, new opportunities, quiet threats. Through them, through the family's shares and board seats, the Rockefellers gained something that even Standard Oil, at its most powerful, never entirely possessed. A voice in the direction of the American economy itself. Railroads, copper mines, utilities, insurance, banking, threads of ownership and influence begin to stretch through sectors far beyond oil. In some boardrooms, a Rockefeller representative sits in the shadows of giants like J.P. Morgan. In others, he is the one whose raised eyebrow can slow or accelerate a decision. The age of a single, towering trust is over. The age of sprawling, interlocking influence has begun. Yet this new power does not like noise. It prefers to move behind the scenes. While the world recovers from the shock of the 1911 breakup, the Rockefeller fortune quietly adapts. Where others see a shattered monopoly, the family sees a diversified portfolio. Where critics see the end of dominance, the trustees see the beginning of a more flexible strength, one less visible but more deeply rooted. At the same time, another transformation is underway. In a sunlit office, removed from the din of stock tickers, John D. Rockefeller, Jr. Son, more reserved and inward than his iron-willed father, reads correspondence from educators, ministers, and reformers. The letters are full of pleas and proposals. For schools in poor communities. For libraries in growing towns. For research into diseases that ravage unseen. Junior's hands are slender, his expression serious. He was raised in a house where money was both a moral test and a powerful tool. From his earliest days, he watched his father pray over business decisions, watched the tide of criticism rise against them, watched their name both revered and hated. Now he is the bridge between these two worlds, industry and conscience, acquisition and distribution. On his desk lies a draft charter for something new, a permanent foundation, an institution designed not to make profits but to deploy them, not to extract but to endow. The ink on the documents that will formalize the Rockefeller Foundation glistens faintly in the light. Its purpose will be written in idealistic phrases, to promote the well-being of mankind throughout the world. The scale is almost absurd, yet the money behind it is real enough, flowing from oil stocks and investments through banks and trusts into a structure meant to outlive any one generation. In another room, advisors debate how much control the family will retain, how the board will be chosen, how to shield the foundation from accusations that it is merely a tool of soft power, a way to launder reputation through generosity. The questions are subtle, but they cut deep. Is philanthropy a form of influence? Can a foundation reshape a society as profoundly as a corporation reshaped an industry? On paper, the Rockefellers are shifting from being captains of industry to stewards of capital and benefactors of public causes. In reality, the line between those roles is blurred. A new architecture of power is being erected, less visible than derricks and smokestacks, but just as real. And as the century advances, as wars erupt and economies tremble, the Rockefeller name will be there, not at the forefront of the battlefield or the stock exchange, but etched quietly into cornerstones and endowment deeds. From oil to influence, the dynasty is learning how to live in the spaces between money and meaning. The world tilts toward modernity, and the Rockefeller presence, once concentrated in the smell of crude and the roar of refineries, begins to settle into places far quieter, far more enduring. Marble, endowments, investment houses, universities, hospitals, bank boards. The empire has changed shape, but not substance. The foundations of power. It begins with institutions, massive, carefully designed, meticulously structured. The Rockefeller Foundation. The General Education Board. The Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research. The Laura Spelman Rockefeller Memorial. Each one appears to the public like a beacon of generosity, but beneath the warm glow of philanthropy lies the precision of a strategist who has traded rail deals for long-term cultural influence. In a Manhattan office filled with filtered light, Rockefeller Jr. reviews reports from the foundation's earliest projects, rural schools in the American South, hookworm eradication campaigns, investments in public health laboratories. Pages rustle softly as he turns them. These are not business reports, but they feel like business to him all the same, each line showing return not in profit but in progress. "They are learning, Father," he writes in one letter. "They are learning because we have given them the means." His father, now old, frail, and nearly translucent with age, nods slowly as he reads the letter. He approves. He believes deeply in the idea of improvement, that the same discipline and efficiency that transformed oil might transform human life. But critics are already sharpening their words. Senators mutter that no private family should have such reach. Professors argue that philanthropy can become a velvet glove for unchecked influence. Newspapers accuse the Rockefellers of trying to buy virtue. A Boston editor writes, "No man, however wealthy, should be allowed to endow the nation's conscience." Yet the money flows. And where money flows, institutions grow, building new pillars of society. The Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, later Rockefeller University, begins attracting some of the most brilliant scientists in the world. In sterile labs that smell of alcohol and steel instruments, researchers peer into microscopes, their faces lit by cold lamplight. In one such room, a young scientist speaks softly to a colleague. This work would have taken a lifetime to fund without them. They look up at the building's stone facade, at the engraved name. It is impossible not to feel the presence of the family behind it. And indeed, in boardrooms miles away, advisors discuss how much to allocate to medical research, how to balance grants, how to avoid appearing to guide the direction of science too. Firmly, influence must be real but not obvious, powerful but not theatrical. This is the new Rockefeller talent, shaping progress without seeming to steer it. At the University of Chicago, built largely from Rockefeller gifts, the Gothic buildings rise like a new American Oxford. Professors pace across quads discussing philosophy, economics, politics. Students rush between lectures unaware, or perhaps unbothered, that their opportunities were born from kerosene and court battles. There is a rhythm to this new world, slower, subtler. Instead of barrels rolling across docks, young minds move through hallways. Instead of fires in refineries, ideas spark in lecture halls. The Rockefellers are not in the classrooms, but their fingerprints are on the doorknobs. Influence through finance. Meanwhile, another arm of the dynasty grows, finance. In lower Manhattan, where the streets are narrow and the buildings tall, a Rockefeller representative sits on the board of what will become the Chase Manhattan Bank. The boardroom is cool and still. Men in dark suits speak quietly about mergers, credit flows, European instability, the price of gold. Rockefeller stock, now held by trusts, family offices, and advisors, gives the dynasty a voice in decisions that ripple outward into factories, towns, and entire markets. Not dominance, not dictatorship, but presence. Where Standard Oil once moved tanks and barrels, the Rockefellers now move capital. During this time, global influence becomes a new frontier. The foundation funds research in China, public health in Latin America, agricultural advances in Africa. Rockefeller advisors meet with diplomats, scientists, ministers of education. The conversations avoid politics on the surface, but power hums beneath every sentence. Your support will change the nation, one foreign official tells a Rockefeller envoy. The envoy bows his head politely. Influence is best wielded softly. The family's internal transformation. Inside the family, generations shift. John D. Rockefeller becomes a near-mythic figure, alive, but receding, like a mountain shrouded in mist. He spends his mornings taking slow walks, his afternoons reading scripture or letters from his children, his evenings listening to the soft crackle of the fireplace. His son, Junior, steps fully into the role of steward. His grandchildren begin to glimpse the weight they will inherit. Conversations around the dinner table blend morality with management. The children are taught charity not as performance, but as duty. They are taught thrift even as they live in houses with staff. They are taught that money is not theirs, but belongs to the family mission. The mission is never stated outright, but everyone feels it. To guide, to improve, to endure. Yet beneath this calm surface, a tension lingers, one that never fully disappears. What is genuine generosity, and what is strategic benevolence? Where does service end and influence begin? Can a family that shaped industry now shape society without creating a new imbalance? These questions surround the dynasty like fog, visible to all but never fully grasped. A new century beckons. As World War I approaches, as markets tighten and global tensions rise, Rockefeller money flows into relief efforts and research. Politicians call, Diplomats visit, bankers whisper, ministers write letters asking for aid. In a world increasingly defined by international currency flows, global banking, and transnational institutions, the Rockefellers hold a kind of leverage that oil alone could never buy. It is no longer the power to control a commodity. It is the power to support, or withhold support from, ideas, institutions, even nations. The dynasty has stepped out of the oil fields and into the bloodstream of the modern world. Influence without refineries. Power without chimneys. Legacy without flames. The story has changed form, but it is far from ending. The tides of history are shifting toward something darker, something more complex, something the Rockefellers cannot fully control, but will inevitably be drawn into. For in the shadows of philanthropy and finance lie questions that no court can answer. How should a family guide the world without ruling it? And what happens when the world begins to resist the quiet hand shaping its direction? Shadows and light, legacy, myth, and the American imagination. The wind whips down between towers of glass and stone, funneling into a plaza paved with cold, clean lines. In the heart of New York City, people skate in slow circles on an ice rink framed by flags and watched over by a golden figure who seems to float above the water, Prometheus, bringing fire to mankind. Above him, the tall stepped facade of 30 Rockefeller Plaza rises into the pale sky. Steel, limestone, and glass catch the winter light. Office windows glow. Elevators rise and fall. Somewhere inside, phones ring, keyboards click, deals are made. This is Rockefeller Center. It smells of roasted chestnuts from street carts, hot pretzels, damp wool coats, and the faint metallic scent of cold air. Children clutch their parents' hands, craning their necks to see the Christmas tree when the season comes, or the sculptures and murals that line the arcade walls. Some of them read the inscriptions, though they may not understand them yet, words about wisdom, work, truth, and the future. Most of them don't think about the name carved into the stone. Rockefeller. For them, it is just a place. For the city, it is a landmark. For historians, it is a monument to a moment when one family's fortune helped reshape not only industries and institutions, but the very skyline of America. The center rises out of the Great Depression, a time when soup lines wrap around corners and banks fail like collapsing dominoes. Jobs vanish. Hope thins. Yet here in Midtown, construction cranes still move. Men in overalls and flat caps climb steel beams, their silhouettes sharp against the sky. The ring of hammers and the buzz of welding torches cut through the gloom. Rockefeller money pays the wages. Thousands of workers put bread on their tables because the family decides to push ahead with the project despite the economic storm. Offices are leased, studios built, theaters designed. NBC sets up its headquarters here, bringing radio and later television into this vertical world of light and sound. A woman in Ohio tunes her radio in the 1930s and listens to a broadcast that was transmitted from a building whose steel and stone came out of oil and dividends. She never sees the plaza. She never skates under the tower. But the sound of music and news arriving in her kitchen is one more echo of a dynasty that has learned to move through culture itself. Up on the observation deck, the air is sharp and thin. A visitor leans against the railing and looks out over the city, the jagged line of the East River, the haze of smoke and steam, the checkerboard of roofs and streets. From up here, it is easy to imagine that someone, somewhere, must be guiding all this. Some say the Rockefellers do. Over time, the family's name gathers stories around it like barnacles on a ship. There are tales of secret meetings, whispered influence, hidden levers in finance and politics. In smoky bars and cramped apartments, people speak the name with a mix of awe and suspicion. They're behind everything, someone says confidently, as if repeating a known fact. They built half the good things we have, another counters. Hospitals, universities, museums, research labs, public health campaigns that rid whole regions of disease, grants that send poor students to college, scholarships that change the lives of children who will never see a barrel of oil or a stock certificate. And yet in the same breath, monopoly, antitrust, power that once suffocated competition, money that still moves invisibly through foundations and boards. In a laboratory funded by Rockefeller money, a researcher in a white coat peers into a microscope, searching for the key to a vaccine. The room hums with the soft whir of machines. The air is sterile, tinged with chemical sharpness. On the wall, a plaque bears the foundation's name. The scientist wipes her brow, tired but focused. If this works, she murmurs, millions of lives could change. She is not thinking about the man who started it all, counting coins in a tin box. She is thinking about cells, data, and the thin line between sickness and health. But somewhere behind her grant, behind the building, behind the network of funding that made her work possible, lies the long shadow of a dynasty that decided to turn oil into something else. The Rockefeller name lives in strange places now. In environmental groups pushing to protect forests and oceans, sometimes funded by the descendants of a man who helped build the fossil fuel age. In diplomatic circles where foundation-backed studies shape international agreements. In think tanks and policy groups whose white papers subtly influence how leaders see the world. Millions of people go about their days unaware that programs helping them, schools, clinics, scholarships, soup kitchens, trace their resources back to a family they only know, if at all, from a city plaza or a line in a history book. Others are keenly aware and ask hard questions. Can private wealth, no matter how generously given, ever truly serve the public good without bending it? Should unelected families have so much say over what gets studied, what gets built, what gets saved? The answers are not simple. They never have been. Down in the plaza, as evening falls, the lights flicker on one by one. Skaters move across the ice, their blades scratching soft, rhythmic lines. A couple poses for a picture. A street musician plays a saxophone, the notes echoing off stone. Somewhere, a tour guide tells a small group, "This complex was built by the Rockefellers during the Depression," and heads nod, impressed. Up above, in one of the ICEs, a trustee reviews a report from a Rockefeller-funded program halfway around the world. A school, a clinic, a research trial. He circles a number, writes a brief note, and authorizes another year of support. The pen moves smoothly. The line is clean. Between the scratch of that pen and the scrape of a skate on ice, between a golden statue in New York and a vaccine in a distant village, the same question trembles in the air like a low, unheard frequency. How far does a legacy reach? And who gets to decide what it means? The shadow of the Rockefeller name stretches not across land now, but across time. Decades pass. The streets fill with automobiles powered by fuels refined by companies that, in another life, once formed pieces of Standard Oil. Radio becomes television. Television becomes the internet. Towers rise, fall, rise again. Wars redraw borders. New empires of data, finance, and algorithms emerge to replace the old empires of steel and oil. And still the name survives. Sometimes whispered, sometimes revered, sometimes resented, often misunderstood, but always present. In a quiet archive room at Rockefeller University, a graduate student opens a box of old papers. The air smells of dust and history. She pulls out a brittle letter written in spidery script, John D. Rockefeller's hand, unmistakable. "I believe the power to make money is a gift from God, to be used for the good of mankind." She reads it twice, unsure what to make of it. The man who wrote it had an empire carved in rebates and rail deals. The man who wrote it also built laboratories where scientists would one day unlock the code of life. Contradiction pulses through the ink like a heartbeat. In Africa, a farmer vaccinated through a program funded by Rockefeller philanthropy watches his children run in a dusty field under a white-hot sun and wonders briefly whose money paid for the needle that protected them. The answer never reaches him. In a Manhattan skyscraper, a banker, far removed from refineries or antitrust trials, makes a decision that shifts millions of dollars with a few keystrokes. He signs a document bearing the letterhead of a financial institution once guided by Rockefeller hands. He barely thinks about it. In a conspiracy forum online, a teenager writes a comment claiming the Rockefellers control the world. He has never opened a history book. He has never visited Rockefeller Center. Yet the myth feels as real to him as the screen in front of his face. In a public school built with foundation support, a child turns a page in a new textbook that replaces one too old, too worn, too thin. She smiles. She learns. She grows. She never sees the donor's plaque hidden near the office door. Power, real power, is often quiet. Sometimes remembered. Sometimes forgotten. Always felt. Years turn. Generations drift. The ice rink fills and empties with seasons. The gold of Prometheus gleams beneath winter stars. The skyscraper lights blink in patterns that mirror the rhythm of the city's heart. And somewhere in the shifting layers of American identity, the Rockefeller story settles into its final form. Not a morality tale, not a simple rise and fall, but a mosaic of brilliance and ruthlessness, discipline and domination, generosity and lingering questions. The boy who once counted pennies by lamplight in a tiny Ohio home is gone. The man who built Standard Oil is gone. The philanthropist who reshaped medicine and education is gone. But the currents he set in motion, they still move. They move in laboratories that chase the edges of science. They move in banks that guide the flow of capital. They move in institutions that will outlive even the memory of the man who seeded them. And they move quietly through the stories we tell about power, how it rises, how it breaks, how it lingers long after the hands that wielded it have turned to dust. In the end, the legacy of the Rockefellers is not a simple legacy of good or ill. It is not a monument or a warning. It is a mirror held up to a nation built on ambition, contradiction, reinvention, and the relentless pursuit of something larger than oneself. As dusk settles over Rockefeller Center, the city hums with electricity. People pass through pools of yellow light. Somewhere, a saxophone echoes in the plaza. Somewhere above, in an office window glowing faintly against the dark, a lone figure reviews a document, a grant, a report, a plan for the future. A page turns. A shadow shifts. A legacy breathes. And the story goes on.